Hello. I will be speaking about Greek music in America, an examination of musical change and identity. But first, I would like to thank Vaso Polizoui of the Museum of Popular Instruments in Athens for the invitation, and also Sophia Aidoni, also of the Museum of Popular Instruments, for all of her help in making this happen. Now, this talk profiles the scope, practice, and development of Greek music in America with attention to its relationship to ethnic identity. Greek diaspora communities encompass a wide range of distinctive social phenomena, one of which is shared acoustic traditions. Barry Truax characterized acoustic communities as, quote, those in which acoustic information plays a pervasive role in the lives of the inhabitants. The community is linked and defined by its sounds. To an outsider, they may appear exotic or go unnoticed, but to the inhabitants, they convey useful information about individual and community life, unquote. Greek diaspora acoustic communities are now and have long been transnational in nature, physically, emotionally, and culturally. As folklorist Joseph Sciorra noted, quote, sounds move, cross borders, and link bodies that might otherwise not be linked, that might otherwise be divided from each other. But sounds also stay put, engendering familiarity and intimacy, creating spaces of shared identity. Unquote. In the diaspora, music is an essential component of most social activities, linking the past to the present, the distant to the near, and saturating the acoustic community with an intricate web of information and memories. And as folklorists Kip Lornell and Anne Rasmussen observed, for many of those whose roots are outside the United States, quote, music invents homeland, unquote. The diaspora brought to America the myriad permutations of music in Greece. During the early 20th century, a flood of immigration combined with commercial record production to generate unparalleled documentation of ethnic music. From 1896 to 1942, more than 2,000 Greek recordings in many genres appeared on U.S. labels, both large and small, and thousands more have appeared since. They encompass not only traditional music from all regions, but also emerging urban genres, stylistic changes, and new songs of social commentary. The recordings were invaluable documents of community musical practices and preferences, often depicting the daily lives of immigrants and the problems that afflicted them. Songs dealt with numerous pressing issues, both within and outside the community. In addition to its social importance to the community, music was also one of its most prized and enduring creations. As historian Dan Yorgakis noted, music proved to be the most important cultural legacy of the immigrants, unquote. The Greeks who arrived in the massive waves of immigration also had an enduring influence on the musical culture of Greece and other diaspora communities, especially those of Australia and Canada. What Gail Holst Warhaft noted regarding one genre was true of many. Quote, the history of Rebetica, both as a recorded and live genre, has always been closely linked to the émigré communities in the United States, unquote. As I trace developments in Greek music in America chronologically, I will consider changes or continuities in genres, instruments, and artists, the shifting ways in which people experienced music, and the impact of historical forces upon creation and distribution. I will also illustrate ways in which music served to bond members of the ethnic group and transfer values or information to new generations, as well as reveal ways in which succeeding generations dynamically negotiated their changing identity as both Greeks and Americans. 1880 to 1918. From the late 1880s to the early 1920s, about 500,000 Greek immigrants arrived in the U.S. Most came because of agricultural failures in Greece and an economy overburdened after the Balkan Wars, 1912 to 13, and the Greco-Turkish War, 1919 to 1922. They were over 90% male, and the majority never intended to stay in the U.S. They found work in cities across the nation, as well as in railroad construction and the mines and factories of the West. In the early days, they had almost nothing. But sharing familiar music helped the immigrants cope with the separation from their families and homeland. And some, such as Cretan lyra player Haralaos Piperakis, recorded songs about their experiences. To West, from 1935, mentions boom towns Sacramento and Vallejo, Lodi, San Francisco, Salt Lake City, and Butte, and the work in mines, ranches, and farms and factories. And first I'm going to play just a little clip of a traditional Cretan song, and then the new song that he wrote about To West. Okay, and now To West. Although 30,000 Greek Americans returned to fight for Greece during the Balkan Wars, the vast majority returned to the United States. Their intention to build their lives provided an impetus for increased immigration by women and other countrymen. Regional folk music was a widespread performance genre. Through these sounds that resonated of home, immigrants revisited their villages or cities and their memories of loved ones left behind. Migratory work and separation were not new to Greeks, who endured centuries of outmigration to improve their lives or escape persecution. The song tradition about xenitia, that is, foreign lands or being foreign, expressed their loss and desolation. With economic problems now propelling new immigration, this genre has renewed relevance. The first musicians and singers came from the ranks of those who sought work or a better life, but professional performers soon traveled to Greek enclaves, labor camps, and coffee houses to entertain the weary and often isolated men. They later performed at weddings, picnics, religious events, and name day celebrations. By 1910, the Café Amman tradition took root in major urban areas, providing venues in which immigrants socialized, ate, drank, and enjoyed music and dance. Musicians were paid generously by the dancers. Instrument makers arrived early to support the musicians. In 1903, luthier Anastasios Stathopoulos established a workshop and later a showroom and factory on Manhattan's Lower East Side. Before 1910, Theodoros Karavas founded an instrument workshop in New York also. And by 1910, Dimitrios Gratsis launched the Trapandros Instrument Workshop in Chicago, and there were many more. Thomas Edison invented the phonograph in 1877. In 1896, Michael Araktingi recorded the first 8 documented Greek commercial records in New York for the Berliner label. The song titles Smyrna Serenade, Great Constantinople Song, and Kozagaki Song, which had Turkish lyrics, reveal his familiarity with music from Asia Minor. Early record companies manufactured and sold record players in addition to creating recordings. Since they engaged in cultural marketing, European and later American-based record companies soon sent field agents around the world to record. By providing ethnic groups with their music, they encouraged continued purchase of music and gramophones. By 1919, an ad for Greek records appeared in Boston's Eastern and Western Review. With the development of new technologies, the commercialization of Greek music took many forms: music cylinders, records, and mechanical music machines such as music boxes and player pianos. Piano roll companies issued traditional and modern favorites, and piano rolls were fundamentally an American phenomenon. In 1916 or early 1917, Kyriaki Antonopoulou, who lived from 1880 to 1954, recorded 34 songs in Greek and sometimes Turkish for Columbia Records in New York. Known as Madame or Kyria Kula, her recordings ignited the boom period of Greek recording in America. By 1918, Columbia issued a Greek record catalog featuring both domestic and imported 78 RPM records. At the same time, Chicago's Apollo Greek Musicians Union was established. Greek immigrant participation in World War I revealed patriotic feelings for both Greece and America. 60,000 Greeks volunteered to serve with the American forces, and many more returned to fight with the Greek military. They believed that the Megali idea of a Greek nation-state encompassing much of Asia Minor would become reality with the defeat of the Ottoman Empire. Eleftheria, or freedom, performed by Marika Papagika and other Greek vocalists, was based on George M. Cohen's hit song, Over There. The lyrics encouraged Greek-American doughboys to plant the Greek flag on Hagia Sophia in Constantinople. The turmoil of the era from 1918 to 1933 can be heard in its music. Offsetting victory in World War I, the burning of Smyrna and expulsion of indigenous Greek populations from Asia Minor in 1922 signaled the end of immediate ambitions for a greater Greece. At the same time, Greek musicians in America realized that they had a freedom of expression that was not permitted in the Old World, and the relative wealth of diaspora Greeks made them a major audience for the arts, one that bought more records than most other ethnic groups. One of the most common early music genres was Byzantine chant, performed as part of the Greek Orthodox liturgy. In the US, priests and others began to compose new liturgical music, which abandoned the traditional Byzantine modes and single vocal line. This music with European scales was presented in a westernized style with choirs and organs. One of the most prominent promulgators of this progressive style was Father George Anastasiou of Tarpon Springs. He formed the Damascenos Byzantine Choir. Both traditional and westernized forms are commonly performed today in America. Moreover, the use of choirs created more active roles for women in the church as vocalists, choir directors, musicians, and composers. With the growing demand for Greek music came the appearance of sheet music, beginning with musician Spiros Bekatouros' 1914 collection and followed by others. Of note was New York's Apollo Music Publishing Company, which long issued sheet music consumed by musicians as well as the general public, who used it for picnics, theatricals, choirs, and informal gatherings. Immigrants soon established independent Greek record companies. The Pan-Hellenian Phonograph Record Company was founded by Lautu player Gus Antonopoulos and his wife, Madame Kula, in New York in 1919. Violinist George Gratsis and Santuri player Spiros Stamus established Chicago's Greek Record Company in late 1922, and the Greek Musicians Union of America formed in New York by 1921. Music released during the era included folk and popular songs, serenades, operas and operettas, comedy and religious music. Record companies, performers, and promoters often targeted specific niches within the diaspora through different genres. In 1927, Nikolaos Roubanis wrote lyrics for arguably the best-known Greek song, Mizerlou, and Tetos Dimitriadis made the first recording. In addition, new songs commented on American social realities such as the Roaring Twenties. Tasia Dimitriadis sang about doing as she pleased, bobbing her hair and smoking in public, in the 1927 hit To Cigaretto. By 1925, Marika and Gus Papagika opened a nightclub in New York on West 34th Street near 8th Avenue. Marika's was arguably the first multinational Café Aman in the US. Since their music shared many characteristics, it attracted not only Greek patrons, but Albanians, Arabs, Armenians, Bulgarians, and Turks. Moreover, the musicians who played in Greek music ensembles, past and present, were never solely Greek. They frequently included Armenians, Sephardic Jews, Macedonians, and Albanians. In her club, Marika Papagika was known for singing the traditional song Armenaki with mixed language lyrics. I'm going to play you just a couple cuts. First of Armenaki, and this is Marika Papagika. And now, Mizerlou, this was the first recording. Now remember this, it's going to come up again later in a much different form. Singer, orchestra leader, and record company executive Theodotos, or commonly known as Tatos Dimitriadis, 1897 to 1971, had a major impact on Greek music. Born in Constantinople, he became a director of RCA Victor Orthophonics International Division. From March 1930 through December 1931, he made over 200 recordings in Greece, focusing on musicians and singers from Asia Minor and Athens, such as Rosa Eskenazi, Rita Abatzi, Dalgas, and many others. The recordings not only made the performers household names in Greek America, but also showcased musical genres, mixed language lyrics, gypsy musicians, and topics like drug use and sex that were marginalized at that time in Greece. Dimitriadis crafted records to appeal to wide audiences, often by combining a song from one genre on one side with another from another genre on the reverse. He also translated popular American songs to fit Greek sensibilities. Then, in Columbia Records' New York studios in January 1932, Ioannis Halikias, known as Jack Gregory, recorded 2 bouzouki instrumentals, To Mysterio and Minore tu Teke. In 1933, he recorded 2 more. Not only were these the first widely popular recordings of bouzouki in Greece or America, but Halikias' musical interpretation became a significant influence on music subsequently recorded in Greece. And I'll play you just a short cut of Minore tu Teke. (1933 to 1945). Music of the interwar era resounded with crises and uncertainties. Half of the early immigrants had already returned to Greece. Among those who remained, only half married, which meant communities that were predominantly male. Some reacted to the Depression by gambling, drinking, and shirking responsibility, which was given voice on commercial recordings. The genre most frequently associated with this kind of lifestyle was rebetika, and among the songs that typified it were Meston Teke tis Maragos at Maragos Teke, 1934, by Dimitriadis, or Olimera Pezi Zaria, All Day Playing Dice, 1928, and O Vangelis O Bekris, Vangelis the Drunk, 1938, by George Katsaros. And here's a short clip by Dimitriadis. The loss of their homeland and exile to the Xenitia, as recorded on dozens of records by Asia Minor Greeks, found a large market outside of Greece. The common experience of exile linked all diaspora Greeks and contributed to the widespread popularity of the xenitia genre, filled with longing for lost family, friends, and village life. Often songs of xenitia were coupled with those commenting on other social problems. The terrible illnesses of tuberculosis or black lung experienced by those laboring in American mines were so prevalent that they generated songs such as George Katsaros's Mana mu ime physikos, Mother Mine, I Am Sick, 1935. Other songs dealt with returning to Greece to escape the deepening economic crisis or to flee an American society by which they were often rejected. But many returnees found that they no longer fit into Greek society. Men also returned to Greece to find brides, a practice that generated mixed emotions. Songs from Greece, such as Mi me stilnis mana stin Ameriki, Mother, Don't Send Me to America, 1934, rejected the returnees. Many artists in the US also recorded this popular song. In the 1930s, immigrant groups were listening to their music on the radio. Greek Hour radio programs broadcast regularly in metropolitan areas. One reason for their popularity, especially during the war years, was that they often were the only news source for an audience often monolingual or illiterate in Greek. Although Greece repelled the Italian invasion on October 28, 1940, it fell to Germany in April 1941. In the US, Archbishop Athenagoras' call for a Greek war relief effort was answered by thousands with war rallies, home relief work, and war bond sales that were occasions for music and dance. Anti-Axis songs from Greece were often played, and sheet music was released by US companies such as Colonial Music Publishing. 1945 to 1960. The devastation wreaked by World War II, followed by the Civil War, precipitated a second wave of Greek immigration. Between 1947 and 65, an estimated 75,000 legal Greek immigrants arrived on American shores. In addition, over 30,000 Greek sailors jumped ship from 1957 through 1974. Post-war recordings reflected a wide range of tastes. The popularity of traditional music and European forms such as tango, foxtrot, and rumba expanded greatly. New York's Liberty Records became the largest independent Greek record company, and among their early releases were mandolinata, mandolin bands, performing folk and European music. Artists continued to release work that combined Greek and American musical forms, such as a swing version of the traditional Kalamatianos Tria Pedia Voliotika, 1948, sung by Nikos Gounaris and with John Raptis and his Aragon Orchestra.
Τρία παιδιά χωλιώτικα μας κλέψαν την ανώρα σαρακατσανίσα Μα σκέψαν την ανούλα, τσαρακατσανίσα.
Definitely one of my favorites. In 1955, to Bouzouki στην Αμερική, with bouzouki by Nikos Purpourakis and vocals by Thodoros Kavorakis, signaled the escalating importance of the instrument. Long-playing record albums became available in 1948, and the first major Greek LPs appeared in the late 1950s. Many of the first ones were simply compilations of previously released 78 RPM records. But eventually, Greek promoters and musicians in the US released a flood of new music ranging from traditional to modern. The first Greek-owned record company to release an LP was New York's Nina Record Company. They brought musicians from Greece to record, who then played in local clubs. Other record companies followed suit. Numerous new labels emerged. Steve Zambilis founded Grecophone Records in Gary, Indiana, and initially recorded island music, or nisiotika. Later, he included artists in other genres, including George Katsaros, Mitsakis Orfanidis, and Haralaos Piperakis. Metropolitan Records recorded Virginia Magidou singing Asia Minor songs with Marcos Melkon on uti, Nikos Donef on violin, and Theodoros Kappas on kananaki. An Armenian from Smyrna, Melkon also sang Asia Minor style songs in Greek, Turkish, and Armenian. During this era, music was presented in various formats. Horo Esperides, variety shows with music and dance were popular. Cultural and fraternal organizations held regular dances and outdoor picnics featuring live music. Hotels or music venues such as Chicago's Aragon Ballroom presented popular Greek nights. Several Greek resort hotels in the Catskills, such as the Sunset Springs and Monte Carlo hotels, featured acclaimed vocalists and musicians. Greek nightclubs emerged from the tavernas. The dominant club music was bouzouki-based, though clubs usually set aside time for visiting musicians to perform on other instruments and in other genres. In New York, clubs were concentrated in a few blocks along 8th Avenue. Among the most popular were Port Said Cafe, Britannia, Egyptian Gardens, Alibaba, and the Grecian Palace. Hotels sometimes offered Greek music in shows that featured two bands, one playing Greek, ballroom, and international, and another playing exclusively Greek music. On March 8, 1953, for example, Rosa Eskenazi and Agapios Tomboulis appeared with Virginia Magidou and the Kalos Discos Orchestra at the Capitol Hotel, and the John de Gaitis Orchestra also played Greek, American, and Spanish dance music. The reach of Greek-American acoustic communities was extended during this time via the media of the day. Radio programs proliferated in major metropolitan areas. They presented the latest recorded music, and many had house orchestras that performed sets or provided background music during announcements. But audiences also experienced Greek music in restaurants, clubs, bars, and sweet shops through jukeboxes. In 1958, Greek-American clarinetist and orchestra leader Gus Valley recorded the first Greek LP on a major label. The Greeks Had a Song for It on United Artists. Valley's parents were from Asia Minor, but he grew up in New York City, where he performed with Artie Shaw and Louis Prima. In the late 1950s, he led a band that played Greek, American, Middle Eastern, and fusion music. His 1962 LP, A Greek in Dixieland, devoted one side to such Dixieland standards as St. James Infirmary and When the Saints Go Marking In, and on the other side were Greek hits such as To Yelekaki. 1960 to 1975. With the passage of the Immigration and Nationality Act in 1965, the U.S. eliminated quotas on European immigrants, generating a stream of 160,000 new arrivals from Greece between 1966 and 1979. At the same time, Americans developed a renewed interest in ethnicity, resulting in a recharged sense of identity among Greek Americans. Differences between the newcomers and the long-established Greek Americans were sometimes reflected in musical preferences or venues. Recent immigrants often took control of fraternal organizations, while churches remained the bastion of established diaspora communities. New forms of instrumental music, song styles, and dance emerged. Lαϊκό, a type of urban folk music with an orientalized style, was popular during the 50s and 60s, along with a lighter version, elafro-lαϊκό. And techno-lαϊκό, or art music infused with folk rhythms and melodies, surfaced in the late 1950s. By the 1960s, films featured soundtracks by techno composers such as Manos Hadjidakis, Never on Sunday, 1960, and Mikis Theodorakis, Zorba the Greek, 1964. Zorba even became a Broadway hit in 1968. Also popular were trios playing a fusion of Latin American and Ionian Islands cantata styles. Trio Bel Canto, the most sought-after 1960s band, played Greek popular music for U.S. audiences. Bouzouki-based popular music dominated in the 1960s. In fact, a severe shortage of bouzouki players was reported in the press in 1961. Elector Records released the acclaimed Greektown, USA albums, showcasing Babis Stergiou on bouzouki and Tassos Halkias on clarinet, as well as concerto for bouzouki with Anestos Athanasiou and singer Anna Chrysofi. But Greek American audiences still wanted to hear regional music, so many bands included both bouzouki and clarinet. Trio Bel Canto also added reinterpretations of folk standards to their repertoire. In addition to nationally and internationally acclaimed bands were countless local or regional groups. That was Trio Bel Canto with Takis Elenis on bouzouki. Songs like Miserlou and Never on Sunday became as much a part of the 1960s American pop scene as the Greek nightclub scene. Lebanese-American guitarist Dick Dale's classic 1963 surf rock version of Miserlou was enormously influential, inspiring performers throughout the world and in Greece, as illustrated by the note-for-note guitar rendition with vocals by pop star Anna Visi at the 2004 Olympics. Another example of the influence loop between Greek music in the United States and Greece. Now first I'm going to play you the Dick Dale version, which came out in 1963, and this was the version I grew up with since I'm from Southern California and surf culture was big. Now, interestingly, this is the 2004 version by Anna at the Olympics opening ceremonies, and it's pretty much note for note the same as Dick Dale. Not the original Greek version, but the Dick Dale version. Now, during this time, there was a resurgence of the Greek town club scene across the United States. The hit movies Never on Sunday, Zorba the Greek, and Z, which came out in 1969, generated mainstream interest in Greek music, creating more work for musicians. While most bouzoukia, or nightclubs, offered some traditional or older pop hits geared towards dance, celebrity vocalists singing Europeanized songs were the headliners. Some believe that Rebetiko died during this era, but in practice, many Rebetiko songs were incorporated into the repertoire of dance bands and performed in an updated style. Belly dancers became a popular attraction, and to accompany them, bands played long improvisational pieces with a Turkish flavor. 1975 to 1990. By 1975, a significant quantity of music was imported from Greece via albums pressed there or recorded in Greece and pressed in the US, but American-based companies maintained strong sales with recordings appealing to the tastes of regional communities. Modern urban laika emerged in the early 1980s, becoming the predominant popular style and often associated with nightclubs. Many songs were sentimental ballads with rock and folk instrumentation, similar to Western pop. When the Greek military ruled from 1967 to 74, the music of Theodorakis gained popularity as a protest against the dictatorship. And there was a revival of Rebetiko at this time in the US because with its rebellious lyrics, it was widely perceived as a way to express opposition to the repressive regime. Exceptional Greek-American musicians and vocalists entertained tens of thousands, each bringing their distinctive mélange to the music scene. The trio Bel Canto remained the most popular touring band of the 70s and 80s. John Tatasopoulos, whom we will see later, was a stellar bouzouki musician and composer who not only performed Greek music, but melded it with Latin rhythms or Middle Eastern music, often playing the latter with Greek-American musicians and with Lebanese violinist Fred Elias. He also was an extremely influential musician for the next generation of Greek-American bouzouki players. As in Greece, young musicians playing at clubs and events, such as bouzouki prodigy George Sophos, began to incorporate rock and roll elements. Takis Zelenis, whom we heard, dazzled audiences with performances that drew inspiration from jazz, rock, flamenco, and Indian music, and other outstanding bouzouki players like Alekos Galis began by performing in Greek clubs, but their music evolved into a jazz-Greek fusion directed to wider audiences. Now I'm going to play a couple clips, first of George Sophos that shows some of the rock and roll influence. This is from around 1975.
σου θα έρθω για να σε βρω. Είπα στην πόρτα σου θα έρθω να βρούμε αλλιώ. Μαζί μου τι μαντάλωσες και βγήκες και με μάλωσες. Και τραβήξε το μάνταλο και έβα στη γωνιά. Να μη σου κάνω σκάνδαλο και βρεις τη γειτονιά. Να μη σου κάνω σκάνδαλο και βρεις τη γειτονιά.
Now that was Tomandalo, which is a traditional song, but here he is a few years later showing, or a few decades later, showing the Tatasopoulos influence more. Traditional music was sustained by Greek societies and folk dance troupes. Regional organizations held regular dances, stepping up the demand for folk musicians. The old church picnics gave way to large Greek festivals that served as fundraisers oriented toward the mainstream public. Sponsored by the National Endowment for the Arts, Ethnic Folk Arts Center, and Greek Ministry of Culture, the Greek Music Tour presented concerts by outstanding performers in 10 major cities from 1982 to 83. American-based musicians included the Halkias Family Orchestra playing Iperotika, Pontian Lyra player Elias Kemetzidis, and Greek-American ethnomusicologist Sam Chianis on santuri. Greek nightclubs flourished in major metropolises, such as Molfetas and the Grecian Cave in the New York area. Their bouzouki bands played a popular repertoire. New York was the primary location of small, intimate, acoustic music clubs called boîtes. On the West Coast, Greek Village and Athenian Gardens in Los Angeles were patronized not only by Greeks, but also Armenians and Jews. With its large Greek community, Chicago supported a thriving music scene. Its Greek town had large bouzouki clubs as well as sophisticated restaurant clubs featuring and techno. Denny's Den was both a club and, in the early days, an artistic hub offering lectures, poetry readings, and discussions. And here's the Denny's Den Ensemble, and this is Aleko Galis on bouzouki, playing a song by Manos Hadjidakis. (1990 to 2015). By the 1990s, the live presentation of Greek music underwent a major shift. Many who left inner city communities turned increasingly to American music. As demand decreased, the number of bouzoukia also diminished. Clubs and restaurants often switched to Greek nights, offering live music only 1 or 2 nights per week. To survive, most bands changed their focus from clubs to events, such as festivals, weddings, baptisms, and dinner dances. times became very difficult for working musicians. As jobs and compensation decreased, so did the number of musicians in bands. Keyboards often replaced the rhythm section or lead instruments like the clarinet. Bands that once performed with 4 or 5 pieces were reduced to 3. The tradition of throwing money to tip the band, once a major source of income, became less frequent and could not be relied upon. And versatile disc jockeys co-opted many gigs that previously required live music. As Kip Lornell and Anne Rasmussen observed, it is difficult to overstate the impact of 21st century digitally based media on the flow of music, because such technology enables not only broadcasting of music, but also communicating about music between musicians and their audiences. YouTube helped revolutionize the ability to post all sorts of video material, from archival historic recordings to entire channels devoted to artists. The digital age and the internet did indeed dramatically change Greek as well as all music business. Yet there has been an increasing demand for old recordings and in new formats, such as Arhuli's 2002 CD, Amalia, Old Greek Songs in the New Land, 1923 to 1950, or the 2014 CD of recordings by Alex Zumbas from 1926 to 1928, which has a label designed by R. Crum based on Madame Kula's Pan-Hellenian labels. And internet postings fulfill much of today's music demand. In Greece itself, there has been a growing recognition that the music produced in America was a unique corpus. Record collectors, academics, and even government agencies have issued compilations of Greek American recordings, sometimes without proper authorization, such as the CD Port Said Cafe with John Tarasopoulos, Freddie Elias, and others at the Washington, D.C. club of the same name. Greek Americans today are largely perceived as fully assimilated into mainstream American culture, but the persistence of Greek music in diaspora communities calls this notion into question. Modest music venues, often in restaurants, continually emerge, and many communities still preserve traditional music, such as Olimpites in Baltimore, who celebrate special events by composing improvisational mantinadas that comment on events. In Seattle, Christos Govetas led Dromino, which specialized in the music of northern Greece. And of course, in Tarpon Springs, we presented bouzouki workshops that continued the practice of the bouzouki among young people. But one important factor in the preservation of music traditions is the vast network of dance groups in the United States. In the 1970s, dance troupe directors created a model in which groups attend and host dance conferences and competitions. This became a significant force as Greek dance, taught through churches and fraternal organizations, increased in popularity. Moreover, national and regional dance competitions, sponsored by Greek Orthodox metropolises, hire outstanding folk musicians to play Greek folk music. And finally, let me say a little bit about the current repertoire at clubs, restaurants, or events. From personal observation, the standard repertoire consists of a mix of older popular hits dating back to the 1950s or 60s, or a little before or after, Rebettica classics performed in modern style, and traditional tunes, often from a region appropriate to the audience. This repertoire is oriented towards an aging audience of post-war Greek immigrants, as well as to younger Greek Americans familiar with the songs from community dances or dance groups. If the audience is primarily young people, then the repertoire is likely to reflect more popular recent hits. And the Greek economic crisis seems to have sparked some revitalization of music in the diaspora. As performance opportunities in Greece diminished, many major artists performed in diaspora communities, a situation that mirrored the post-World War II and Civil War situation in the 1950s and 60s that brought the cream of Greek music to perform or live in the United States. In conclusion, I want to note that Greek American ethnic identity is complex and has changed over time. Today, most Greek Americans share basic continuities, but values and practices are tied to the date of immigration, both because Greek culture itself has changed over time and because a third or fourth generation Greek American will be more closely allied with an American ethos. In the early stages of immigration, music served primarily to bond members of the ethnic group and to reconnect them with their homes. Later, it was an essential element in creating and maintaining ethnic identity, both in terms of transferring information and values from generation to generation and in creating contexts in which group cohesion was expressed. Music also played a strong role in expanding ethnic identity by incorporating stylistic elements from American and other cultures. This is consistent with Rolf Lidskog's finding that music can, quote, provide the basis for continuous construction and renegotiation of ethnic identities, unquote. Since Greek music arrived in America, there has been retention of traditional repertoire and forms, as well as major transformations and fusion. Some changes have been similar to those that occurred in Greece. In other instances, Greek Americans have incorporated musical elements encountered in the United States. Frequently, the changes entered the loop of musical influence that has long flowed between Greece and its diaspora. Some have decried change and modernization in instrumentation, style, or genre, but music never remains static, and this constant evolution can be considered proof that the music is still alive and well.